My 365 Podcasts with me, Pete Cohen. Hi, it's Pete Cohen, and you join me for another My 365 podcast. Now, I have an amazing guest who just told me something about her that I've never met anyone that has done what she has done in the past. Her name is Deborah Walker. She's a naturopath. Deborah, good afternoon, good morning, good evening.
Thank you for having me, Peter.
So listen, tell me, what is a naturopath? What do naturopaths do?
We're basically more widely trained, so effectively we work with nature cures approach, with nutrition and cleansing, and then some of us will use botanicals like herbs or homeopathy. Some of us will work in iridology, bioresonance, acupuncture. So effectively we're almost not just one therapist, we're a number of therapists rolled into one.
So so many questions I'd like to ask you about that, but I asked you, how did you become a naturopath? And you said you used to be a weaver.
Yes.
So tell me about that. How did you get into weaving?
I did my degree in textile art, effectively. So I trained at the same art school that Lennon and MacArthur went to in Liverpool, and it was the Polytechnic by then. I effectively just enjoyed art. I pursued it. I got my degree in it, and I exhibited around the world for about 10 or 11 years, and then I went into the corporate sector.
So when you say weaving, what sort of things were you weaving?
I wove cloth, I wove sculpture, I created what was in my mind, what was in my sketchbook. I basically, it's like a vocabulary art, isn't it? Effectively, it's a form of expression. Yeah. And everything we do should be a form of expression. Our life is a form of expression, and artists take it and then not so much verbalise it, but verbalise it in an art form. We create a structure out of it, and then we show other people. We open ourselves up often to what is in our minds. Yeah.
That's really amazing. So how did you go from doing that to go into the corporate world to then becoming a naturopath?
Basically, life changed for me, so I had no choice. So my artwork very much only paid for itself. Therefore, I had to make a decision, and I went into working for the corporate sector. I worked my way up the ladder. I worked in change management in a variety of roles over an 11-year period, and came to a point where I knew it was time to leave. I was working for people and working in an environment that I didn't enjoy, that wasn't fulfilling my soul, wasn't feeding my soul, wasn't feeding my mind in the right way. I learned a massive amount, don't get me wrong. I learned a huge amount, things that I would never have learned as an artist, because I learned to have discipline, I learned to have structure, project management skills, and management of money skills, all those sorts of things. I worked with somebody who basically would never say no, would never accept no. And therefore, he was very difficult to work for, but I never dared go back and say I couldn't do something. I would get as close as possible to actually achieving those goals for him. And so I learnt a massive amount. But at a certain point, I knew it wasn't really for me anymore. And I'd seen a self-employed life where I could work in a way that fed my soul far more, and then I'd worked in a way that fed my bank balance far more, and I knew that I needed to marry the two in some way so that I could move forward. And I effectively had the skills from being self-employed and then being employed to bring that together into what.
So what was it about naturopathy? Naturopathy, that's the word. Yeah. What was it about that? How did you come across that field?
So what happened was, when I was 21, I had ME. Yeah. And so between 21 and 27, I was incredibly ill. Yeah. And I couldn't get out of bed for periods of time. I fulfil the typical, achiever, perfectionist. Yeah. You could tick all those things off with people who tend to have chronic fatigue or ME. And I went on a journey of trying to find out what was wrong with me and why, because I saw up to 9 doctors at one stage, and one of them told me that I was a hypochondriac, and started to speak to my partner next to me. I was told I was depressed. Of course I was depressed by that point. Yes. Effectively I couldn't get out of bed most of the time. My partner had to take me to the toilet, to the bedroom, all these sorts of things, because I couldn't move around physically. I'd have about 1 week out of 3 where I could get up and do things. And it led to having anxiety and things like that. So I went on a journey to try and find out why I'd got it, and then what I needed to do about it. There wasn't a lot of information around 20 odd years ago about it, and I started this journey of personal development. I realised that it wasn't just the food. I realised it was my mind. My mind played a massive part in my health. And that's why what I work in now is all about not just the food. Many people can tell me, when I do talks, if I put apples out and beautiful food, fresh, wholesome food, and then I put Mars bars and all sorts of junky confectionery type foods, and I say, which one do you think you should be eating that will feed the mind and the soul and the brain and create optimum performance? Everyone will point to the right food, and I say, so in my latest talk, why can't I lose weight? I say, what food are you eating mostly? They'll point to the other food, and so it's not about the food. It's not that people can't identify the food. It's about what's going on in the mind that's then creating the psychology behind the choice. What's driving that behaviour? So ultimately, I went on my own journey where I read a number of books, yours included, Fear Busting, I think it was.
Yeah, actually, I just forgot you said that to me yesterday, that you read a couple of my books and that had a big impact on your life.
Yeah. And that was why yesterday when I met you, I did a double take. I'd come to listen to somebody else and actually realise you were here speaking.
Well, what's also really interesting is that I had ME, and I didn't know that. I had ME for like 10 years. Yeah. And I was on a desperate search to get better. I mean, there were days where I even remember saying to my mum, I want to go to sleep. I don't want to wake up because, and I the same. It was crazy. I also went on a very similar journey to you to find answers to. So when did you start to get? Enough about me. When did you start to get better?
When I hit about 27, between 27 and 29, I effectively started to clean my diet up. A variety of things happened in my life personally, and that led to me not being able to eat the types of food, so all the sweets and all those extra things, I couldn't afford them in the same way. So naturally they fell out of my diet, and then I'd already been vegetarian for a number of years. I became vegan. So what happened was I more or less accidentally cleansed, and I started to feel much, much better. I started to be able to go out with my dog again and walk, so I increased the walking slowly but surely. And really, at that point, I then was able to start to do the reading, and I started to go on personal development. And the more I got out around other people, the more I realised that people had stories and were saying, oh, have you thought about taking this and looking at this? And so I would go on the next course and then the next course. I have 26 qualifications now because mainly I've pursued the next personal development course, not because I'm somebody who needs the qualification, but I wanted an answer that my own naturopath and my own therapists were not giving me. So I work now in a way that's very educational. So when I speak to my clients and I understand their story, I then enable them to unpick it, and then I explain their map of basically how they've got to this point, what has created it, what are the traumas, what is the stress that they have experienced, what is that likely to have done, what will have led to these things happening, what's happening with their behaviours. So women who are having mad cravings and they're going through massive guilt about it, and then emotional eating, I'll enable them to understand why they're the value of health is much, much lower, and why that's driving their behaviour and their family values and those behaviours. So ultimately for me, that was the journey I went on to understand that, and that's now I work in a way that's educational.
It sounds like it's more than educational. It sounds like you're actually coaching people because you're trying to helping people to become more aware of what is going on for them, and then helping and supporting them in taking responsibility. So there's many areas of your work which are fascinating, and obviously I know that you have worked with some very famous people, and I'm not going to ask you to talk about those people, obviously, of course, but please do and tell me who they are. No, you do a series of podcasts, so tell us who are some of the people that you've interviewed?
I've recently interviewed Dr. John Demartini.
Wow.
Who's,
so tell us, because a lot of people might not know who he is. So.
He's an amazing motivational speaker who travels the world about 360 days a year. And he's constantly travelling. His whole he basically was trained as a chiropractor. And then ultimately he realised that his clients, it wasn't just the chiropractic that was getting people well. It was what he was saying, and it was how he was enabling them to understand their story of what they had created in their own mind about their health and their own lifestyle and things like this. And he helped them to unpick it, and that's effectively what he does. So his latest podcast podcast with myself was all about images, the images we create and how powerful that is. You know yourself, language is an incredible, it's like a spell we can create. We can create a story of and if we constantly reiterate that, we then become it. You know, Bruce Lipton is somebody who talks about the biology of belief.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we have the research now that clearly shows we switch on gene expression. We can switch it on and off with what we think and what we believe.
Say.
Yeah.
So obviously, it'd be good to give people the information of where they can go and listen to all of your podcasts, because it sounds like there's just a whole library of awesomeness that people can tap into. So the story thing I think we should explore, because what My 365 podcasts are all about is helping people My 365 their life, which is about doing a turn, a 180, a 360, and mastering the 5 fundamentals as best as they can. You know, eating, sleeping, moving, having a positive mental attitude, finding some sort of silence in some part of their life, and helping people just achieve whatever it is they want to achieve. So all of the people that you've interviewed, let's tell us about what are some of the most interesting things or the most fascinating things that you've learned yourself. And maybe one of those things is the story that we tell ourselves.
I think it's the understanding that visualization is incredibly powerful. What we tell ourselves daily and on a moment-by-moment basis matters.
Yeah.
If we are constantly beating ourselves up or feeling guilty, it comes out in our cellular picture, ultimately.
Yeah.
And Robert Foreman, I think, was very profound. He'd done a lot of things wrong. He'd still reached a level of enlightenment, but he'd never reached it all, because ultimately that's the whole journey for him.
Yeah.
And to be sat with someone who he's a director of a major institute in the US on enlightenment studies, to find that he still is on that journey himself and still making mistakes in the age of 60 is quite important for other people to understand that we're not perfect.
Yeah.
We're meant to make mistakes. It's our biggest learning. You were talking about the comfort zone in your talk. You know, the magic. I have a picture that I send out to my clients, you know, and I have a cross outside of a circle with an arrow pointing to say magic happens here.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't
outside
happen.
of your comfort.
It does. You know, Gay Hendricks talks about that leap that we have to make, and that we sabotage ourselves. We prevent ourselves from moving outside of almost a set point.
Why is that, do you think? Do people have issues moving out of what is familiar?
I think it's because we create habits that create safety for ourselves, and we feel that we can work within that boundary, and then putting our toe outside the water as a level of danger in a number of ways. Let's face it. You know, you talked about the fact that people immediately, when I said I was moving over to Northern Ireland, you know, I run 2 clinics in England, and I was immediately told, you can't leave your business. That wasn't how I felt. I felt that actually I wasn't leaving my business. I was building a bigger business now in another country as well.
Yeah.
And so I had a very different perspective. So I think people who are around you, your environment matters. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It truly matters. If you're in an environment, you know, let's just look at the drumming here.
Yeah.
You know, you can see people tapping and moving to the drums because sound and music is profound on people. You ask about memories. Most people, you play music, so
remember.
Yeah, they'll be able to tell you when they first heard that track or why that track's important to them, because it's become part of their cellular picture.
Yeah. So the cellular picture is, how would you describe that? It's just what people are saying to themselves, how they're moving through the world. So how does someone go about changing that?
I think it's... you know, my mum's not a rocket scientist. She doesn't have any big qualifications or anything. She's a mum, and she basically had us eat proper food. And ultimately, I think, you know, we have to start with diet.
Yeah.
Just eat food as close to nature. I can't remember. I think it's Richard Templer, the rules of eating off food. I think the book's called. I'm not quite.
Rules of. I can't remember.
Yeah, anyway, I can't remember off the top of my head. But he actually says, you know, eat like your great grandparents ate. He's absolutely right. You know, we need to be eating from the garden, and we need to be eating vegetables. 30% of the population eat the government guidelines of vegetables, and that's the adult population. That's between the ages of 18 and 65. Mm-hmm. And so the rest of the population don't eat enough vegetables. Children do not eat enough vegetables, yet they're incredibly important for the functioning of the body, for the functioning of the mind.
Yeah.
And so for me, you have to have the foundation of food in place. You have to have the foundation of hydration in place.
So what happens when people actually start? I mean, everyone knows that they should eat better, but what actually happens when people do inside our bodies when we eat that much better? What's actually happening on a physiological level?
So we start to be able to make connections properly. We start to be able to communicate at a cellular level. We bring in the electrolytes. That then, imagine we're an electrical circuit.
Yeah.
And we can start to spark and send those signals faster, far more coherently within our bodies and to our mind. Ultimately we bring our guts into balance. So many people have got gut issues. And yet our gut, it's shown that we have a superhighway from the gut, from the bowel, effectively through to our mind, through the vagus nerve. It sends more signals from that area to the mind than the mind does to the actual gut.
Yeah.
Think about that. If we don't have good health in this part of our body, which is all around the abdomen and our digestion, if your digestion is anywhere out of balance, and we are sending children's guts out of balance in childhood because we're putting them through constant testing, so they're stressed.
Yeah.
And then we're putting them on foods, or we're allowing them to eat foods that are not optimized. They're high in sugar. They're now, Monster drinks have got these caffeine in them.
Yeah.
Caffeine is clearly shown to not only create the stress but also suppress the immune system. Do we want to be suppressing the immune system of our children anymore? Not really. Caffeine only increases the performance for a period of time. After a certain point, we create a tolerance to it.
Yeah. Wow. So nutrition is I love the way you explain it. The electrolytes and the energy flowing through the body, sparking because the cells in our body are communicating with themselves much better because we're giving them what they need to live. And not just survive, but to thrive.
Yes. And ultimately, if we cannot communicate with our own body, we cannot communicate with each other. We cannot think straight. We can't make decisions. We can't learn. So therefore, those foundations are incredibly important. We need water as well. Most people are not drinking water. Most people come to me and say, I know I'm not drinking water. I know immediately what I need to put on their treatment plan. They write their first treatment plan mostly themselves. Could you eat more vegetables? I don't eat enough vegetables.
Yeah.
Could you have water? Oh, I don't drink enough water. Right. I'm bringing people off coffee because most people are stressed. They're living lifestyles where they have to have a cup of coffee to boost themselves, to wake up. And ultimately it's because they're not hydrated effectively. Yeah. And we need to be focused on those hydrating foods, those foods that create flow.
Yeah.
We flow as human beings. We can connect far better with each other. We then reduce anxiety.
No, I like the way you explain it because it gives like a different perspective. I'm sure a lot of people will just even for me, I just see things slightly differently by the way it makes me look at green vegetables with even more love than I had for them before.
And we don't eat greens anymore. We should eat a rainbow of vegetables. Steiner's work was really interesting around colours of foods.
Colours, yeah. That's a balanced diet.
Absolutely. And my mother used to just put a rainbow of foods out, and she was absolutely right. There's no qualifications. We don't need to
I think people get so het up on carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and they get het up on calories rather than just make it colourful and make it as close to the garden as possible,
Well, I can meet my calories by just eating a few chocolate bars a day. Yeah. But am I getting the true nutrients that my body needs to then be able to function effectively? My partner, he'll he'll confirm, I wake up in the morning and once I'm awake, he'll say, you're hyper, I'm off, I'm focused. And it's because I intuitively know what I should be putting into my body. And I feed it. And yes, I eat the odd piece of cake and things like this, but ultimately I'm totally focused on what I need to be able to live the life that I want to lead, the energy that I want to be able to give my clients. So is that
one of the other things that you've kind of learned from, obviously, your own experience, but from interviewing some incredible people, that you've got to have some sort of purpose and know what your life is about? Because if you don't, then why would you make your health a priority?
I think people lose track. I think we're very much taught. I worked in HR and I had an experience with some graduates once, and they basically just wanted to tell me that their whole focus had been about moving into recruitment in HR, and that was their big goal in life. And in many respects, I felt quite sad that it wasn't about travelling, it wasn't about becoming an astronaut, it wasn't about driving a fire engine and all those mad things you have as a child. I just want to be curious and be expressive and explore. It was almost very career orientated and very focused on what's the next thing and the next thing. I believe that life is a journey, life is about exploring and still being curious as a child. I was at a party last year and I saw this child and she blew bubbles. She was about 3 years old. She blew bubbles and her face was absolutely profound for me. It was, look at that. And I thought, we need to have that all the time. And that's what purpose is about for me. Purpose is about that every day I wake up and I go, wow.
Yeah. I was listening to someone the other day, Brendan Burchard, who's got one of the top podcasts in the world, and he was talking about purpose. And he was saying that maybe the purpose of your life is to feel alive.
Yeah.
And the more alive that you feel, like you were explaining with that little girl, she was just obviously totally alive. That just to be alive and to share that with other people, because that makes a difference to people. I mean, we all know what it's like if you're not feeling very well and you're around other people, or you're depressed or you're sad or whatever it is. People often don't want to be around you and you don't make a difference. But I suppose when you feel alive because you're doing the things that make your body the best it can be. I think one of the things I find so interesting is how most people know they're most alive when they're not feeling well.
Yeah.
When you've got a cold or you've got the flu and your whole body's aching, that's when I think a lot of people have forgotten, haven't they, just what it's like to have vibrant energy, to feel alive, like I can do this, I feel well. So what you're saying on some of the key fundamentals of that is definitely to give your body more of what it needs.
Yeah. You don't know what you've lost you don't know what you've got until you've lost it.
Yeah.
Ultimately. And most people come to me with chronic disease states, and therefore I see that their sole purpose at that point has become their health. But ultimately, if we understand that our health and our time is our only true asset, would we really be spending it in the way we are? Or would we be investing? Because for me, it's about investing. And therefore, my whole focus is on... I'll just say, my dad was really interesting. He said to me, if I wanted something, I had to save up for it. Because what he explained was that every time, all the time I spent saving up for something, was it worth it? Doing what I was doing?
Yeah.
Did I actually want? No, we didn't have iPads and things like that at the time. But when I get something now, I really work out. I've now got to give 3, 4, 5 hours of my time up to actually have that. Do I want it that much, or do I want to spend it walking in the mountains with my dog? Do I want to spend it looking out? Would I rather spend it with the people I truly love? And if the answer is yes, I would like that, I think it's going to enhance my life and it is a true investment and it's going to improve it, then I think that's a great return on investment. And that's how I see it. I see everything I do as what's my return? Because I think when people spend frivolously their time and give it away, they give it away suffering, stress, worry, anxiety, being in fear. And actually, I think if we pull that back and think, how can I invest this time better to move out of that, people wouldn't be experiencing the illness that they experience.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful way of looking at it. And I'm sure many people that will listen to this will have a go at doing that, because it is a way of... It's a tool, really, isn't it? Just to make that choice, but based on thinking about things before you actually do it. I suppose for me, at my age now, 45, I think for the first time in my life, I'm now starting to just become a little bit more aware of, okay, I'm not going to be here forever, and I'm becoming more aware that what I'm doing today is going to have an effect on how I am tomorrow. And I think a lot of people need to wake up to that fact. But that's a choice, right? I mean, that's a choice that everyone can or cannot. It's up to anyone to make that choice.
Well, they say, youth is wasted on the young. And ultimately, we live life to a certain point and we give our time away. We just want to explore and have fun and things like this. But, we're at the age which actually it starts to become more of a profound thing. My auntie a few years ago, she's not very eloquent, I'll be absolutely honest, so I apologise for that, but she said, you're a long time dead. I was feeling very low at that point, and it has stayed with me for all of my life, because actually she was, I don't know if she's wrong, in all honesty, the shamans outside might disagree, but ultimately I'm yet to find that out. So actually, I really see that what I do needs to be an investment. Therefore, I invest in my health. I invest making sure I drink the right things, and it's more than 80% of the time. I say to my clients, if you can do 80% of the time, it will carry the 20%.
Yeah.
And you're not quite following it for. And then it's about the mind. You have to work on the mind. From my perspective, the water and the diet are the easy parts to put in place. Supplementation's easy.
Yeah.
The journey is then about discovering the story that you're telling yourself, and the words that you use, because ultimately they will unpick everything.
What are some of the common stories that people tell themselves? Because I hear that all the time.
They don't have enough time.
I don't have time. What else? I'm not worth it. I'm not good enough.
I don't have the money for it.
Yeah.
It's a struggle. It's hard. It's really difficult to do that.
Yeah.
So they basically put barriers in front of themselves all of the time. Oh, I don't have the energy.
Yeah.
I can't.
So how do you make people aware of the stories that they're telling themselves?
So ultimately it's about holding up a mirror, but also I use specific techniques. I'll show them. I'm very much an educator, so I'll show them how to use specific techniques to quiet the mind down, to enable them to become intuitive about the body far, far more. Because the more we step out of the busyness that we've created and the world that we have, where it's constant, our mobile phones are constantly dinging all the time. And once we extract ourselves from those things, we can listen. We can truly listen and start to explore what we want rather than what is being fed. Because often we're being fed imagery, we're being fed words, we're being fed information that very much directs us. And although we think we're in charge of our mind, when you just watch a few videos of Darren Brown, and he will clearly tell you that he's one of the most brilliant people. I'll never forget. He did an episode with Saatchi and Saatchi about the animal heaven. Saatchi and Saatchi, the two Saatchi and Saatchi advertising gurus were showing him afterwards the pictures and that they had designed for this advertising campaign, and Darren Brown pulled out of the envelope almost the same picture and the same wording, and he clearly showed how he'd taken them on the journey and actually had implanted it. And therefore it's about every single day implanting the seeds of your mind so that you can grow. And that's what I do every time I work with my clients. I plant seeds and I show them tools and techniques to effectively grow, and books and things like that.
So how should people start off the day then? I mean, if you're encouraging people to start, because it seems to me every day is obviously a new day, and if you get into routines and habits of kind of changing your life, what do you encourage people to do?
So let's start the night before.
Yeah, that's good, because that sets up for the next day.
It does, absolutely.
A good night's sleep.
Yes. And, we have the neuroplasticity of the mind is only really starting to become understood. Yeah. So therefore, use it. We grow overnight. We cleanse
so what you feed
overnight.
yourself before you go to bed, what you say to yourself.
Absolutely. Set the evening up. Don't be using your devices after 8 p.m. at night. The backlight, in effect, triggers the melatonin, changes the circadian rhythm or the chronobiology in the body. Therefore, if you have not got that right, you won't have a good night's sleep. You basically, the next day won't be set up very well. You'll want to eat more. You'll change your hormonal picture the next day. Therefore, switch off your devices at 8 p.m. at night. Go back to real books. Don't watch adrenaline-fueled dramas and things like this. All the news, anything that's fearful and is going to change.
Feed your brain at night,
Yeah, basically. Have a good night's sleep. Be in bed by 10:30 and sleep properly through the night. And then the next morning, wake naturally if you can. You want
alarms.
If you can, and follow the light through the day with your food. I always say that, in effect, if you can be finished eating by 6 p.m., then you've followed the light, and that for me is a more natural way of eating. The Chinese would have you eat before 10 o'clock in the morning, so having a good breakfast and setting yourself up. Eat proteins with
always
each
have an
meal.
egg. You know why the Chinese often have an. Yeah. So tell me about breakfast. Why is that so important?
Well, it's important to set your day up, basically. So I always make sure that you should be having hydration. hydration is incredibly important to me. So make sure you are drinking a glass of water on waking, because it aids the digestion. It starts to move the bowels.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's one of the most important things we should be doing. And
said hot, warm water as well.
Yeah, I don't like water from the fridge, although there's clear research out there that cold water is very beneficial and is absorbed into the cells very quickly. So it really depends on what you're trying to achieve with the body, but most people are fine if they just drink body temperature water, and I mean body temperature water, not your cold in the morning, not your hot in the morning, and that way the body doesn't hold on to it into the stomach. It will go straight through to the bowel point, and therefore it's going to move the bowel, which is the aim in the morning, because most people are not moving their bowels effectively nowadays. And then eating a good breakfast, making sure you have protein with each meal across the day, keeping your blood sugar balanced. So we were saying, about having eggs, things like that for breakfast. And having that protein is incredibly important. It helps with the detoxification of the body and also the building of the body. The amino acids are incredibly important for enabling things to happen. So ultimately, for me, it's about having regular meals across the day so that you are balancing your blood sugar.
Excellent. And honestly, you are one of the most positive people and the most inspiring people to live a better life and a healthier life. So tell me, how can people find out more about you, and specifically those amazing podcasts? You've got like 100.
Yes, I've done about 100 plus, and they're available on YouTube, and they're available on iTunes and through Natural Health Radio, and the website is Passport to Change. So it's
Passport to Change, and then will people be able to find out where all those podcasts are? And
there's recipes on there. There's a few recipes. Don't do a lot of recipes. There's always a blog on there about what I'm thinking about at the moment, and something to inspire people.
Well, I would encourage everyone that's listening to this, one of the reasons we do this is for people to hear from other people and get inspired. There's no one person that everyone should go and get all of their advice from. I think it's great to hear from other people, and you've obviously invested huge amounts of your time in interviewing some incredible people. I'm definitely going to be checking out those podcasts and using that information myself for my own health and well-being, but sharing it with other people. Thank you so much for being a brilliant guest, and I'm sure we're going to meet again sometime soon. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast, and if you want more free inspiration to optimize your life so you can achieve your goals in all the different areas of your life, then visit my365.me. That's mi365.me, and sign up to 365 days of free coaching with me, Pete Cohen. Thanks for listening, and have an awesome day.